everyone. Welcome to Soapbox Theology. This is Pastor Gabe. Today I wanted to talk about the necessity of sacrifice, the necessity of especially the biblical sacrifice. There seems to be new teaching where the atonement was a horrible thing, a wicked thing, a not true thing, an unnecessary thing. And some of the verses that they tend to go to, which is Psalm 51 and Hosea, I think it's 6. But these idea that the atonement is not necessary, and God is now about mercy, God is now about other things. And while it's true that the progression of Scripture was coming to the point where God would ultimately make his own sacrifice, it isn't true that God is somehow negating or undermining the whole point of sacrifice. We're told without the shedding of blood there is no remission. We're told this in Leviticus and Hebrews. But there's these verses that they like to go to where they say, see, it says right here that God prefers other things instead of sacrifice. So I wanted to actually go look at those two texts contextually, because they're actually not talking about that at all. So the first one is Psalm 51, essentially David crying out for mercy. He's committed his sin with Bathsheba, he's had Uriah killed, and he's crying out for mercy. And the chapter begins, "Have mercy on me, O God, according to the steadfast love, according to your abundant mercy. Blot out my transgression. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin." So he's calling out for mercy. He's calling out for God to have grace on him, because he's really put himself in it. And so, but jumping down to the verse 16, it says, "For you will not delight in sacrifice, or I would give it. You will not be pleased with the burnt offering. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. O God, you will not despise." And so many people take this to mean, well, see, God actually is not about the sacrifice. He just wants us to be sorrowful. He just wants us to come to God seeking forgiveness. And while this is true in the New Testament with the new system that God has set up through the sacrifice of Jesus, David is not saying God doesn't require a sacrifice for sin. Now, why do we know that that's true? Because if you go back to the book of Leviticus, you find out that there are certain sins that you don't get to bring a lamb and simply offer a sacrifice for. There were certain sins that just got you killed. You know what some of them were? Adultery and murder. If you committed adultery and you were caught, you were to be put to death. There wasn't a sacrifice in the law that says when you commit, when you steal someone's wife and have sex with her, and it's cool, just bring a little lamb and we're good. Not that any of the sacrifices were that cavalier, but the point I'm trying to say is that sin was a bigger issue, and it resulted in the death penalty. Same thing with murder. If it could be shown that it was an accidental, then that's when they have the cities that you could escape from to avoid the avenger, because they're really angry that that all that stuff happened. But not when it was a straight up murder. When it was a murder, you were to be put to death. We have to understand, when David is crying out for mercy in this chapter, remember the story. Nathan approaches him. He tells him the story with the little lamb, and he says, "You are the man." The reason that David is crying out in the way that he is because he knows he has no quarter. There is no mercy and grace for the sins that he's committed. According to the law, he should be put to death. So when he says, "For you will not delight in sacrifice, or I would give it," he's not saying, you just don't want a sacrifice. That's just not what you're into. You would rather prefer that I have a broken and contrite spirit. No, he's saying there is no sacrifice for me to give. I am out of luck. I deserve to die. And God is still merciful and just because I have violated his covenant so grossly. he's well aware that he can't give these things, and so he is crying out. He is banking on the character of God. He's banking on the character of God. It says, the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. O God, you will not despise. See, he's banking on the fact that God is gracious and God is merciful. And we know this from Exodus 34, when God reveals himself to Moses as the Lord, slow to, right? He's slow to anger and rich in love. He has great compassion and mercy, and he loves his people. He's merciful and he's gracious, but then the end of that says, but he absolutely will not acquit the guilty. In this case, David is making appeal to that first part of the character of God because he's stuck in that second category of he is guilty and there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. So he's appealing to God, he's asking for mercy, and because of the character and grace of God, he's actually granted that. Dogs again. But that is what is going on in this chapter. It's not a despising and saying sacrifice is no longer needed. Therefore, what Jesus came and did was not a atoning sacrifice. It's like, no, it's not what this is saying. This is saying, in this case, there isn't anything that can be done, which is, the point is, it's therefore so much greater when Jesus does come and make the, yes, atoning a sacrifice and offering of himself, because then everything can be forgiven. We don't have to plead to God and say, oh, I hope that you'll forgive me in this instance. Well, like we now know. See, if Christ would have died before this, and David would have known the theology that we have now, he wouldn't have been saying this. He would have just saying, God, forgive me. And I know that you do, because you have made the necessary sacrifice already. He wouldn't be mourning and devastated over the fact that he didn't have one he could personally make. So this is something that we need to keep in mind when we hear people saying that this is somehow undermining the atonement and the necessary sacrifice. I just want to take a small break and look at Isaiah 53. This is where you have to totally reinterpret this entire chapter to say that this is not atonement. This is not, he died and it wasn't about taking away sins. It was about, whatever else they might fill it out to be. It says, surely he was born for our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God and afflicted, but he was pierced for our transgressions. Okay? He was crushed for our iniquities. Upon him the chastisement that brought us peace, and by his wounds we are healed. We all like sheep have gone astray. We have turned away every one to his own way. The Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. So again, when the suffering servant, what this is prophesying and is fulfilled in Jesus, is coming, it's dealing with transgressions. It's dealing with iniquities. It's dealing with the sins that are being put on him. We'll jump down to verse 10. Yet it was the will of the Lord to crush him, to make an offering for guilt. For what? Guilt. Yeah, I don't see how you can read Psalm 53 and come away with an interpretation that doesn't have to do with making us right with God, with the forgiveness of sins. So let's jump over to the other text that they use in this situation, which is Hosea. I believe it's Hosea 6. Let's look it up. All right, so we've seen it's not really what's going on with David and the Lord. He's not proclaiming, saying, I'd give a sacrifice, but that's not really what you care about. He's saying, I can't give a sacrifice, so I need to rely on the mercy and the grace of God. In Hosea 6, there's a similar thing going on, but it's being approached differently. The prophet Hosea is being sent to Israel for their gross and continual blatant sin. If you understand the context of the book, God even tells Hosea, go out, find a prostitute, a whore, marry her, and this already would be a huge scandal before Israel. But do this because I want this to be a sign to the people of Israel. This is how I view them. They're acting. They're playing the harlot. They're playing the whore. They're cheating on me. They're being completely unfaithful. So they're not faithful. They're not in the right covenant. They're acting completely against the edicts of God. They're not following. They're being completely unrighteous. And the whole book is God continually pointing out to them how they're in violation, how they're not following the law. They're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're in complete rebellion. And it seems to be that they're, in a sense, carrying on with the same outward traditions, but inwardly, and they're just sinning. They're whoring, they're going after other gods, but they still seem to be partaking in the sacrifices of the temple. So they're kind of outwardly still going about the religion, but it's kind of like what Jesus says in the beginning, like, they serve me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me, essentially. And that's kind of what they're doing here. They're following traditions to some sense, almost to kind of like fulfill the lowest common denominator with God, but they're still playing with other gods and violating the covenant. And so when we read this in Hosea 6:6, we have to hold that context in mind. It says, "For I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice." And then here's the second part, "the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings." God prefers them to have and hold and carry and bind inside them the knowledge of God, not to simply just carry out an empty sacrifice. Okay, so part of the judgment God is saying is, even your sacrifices are abomination to me. Okay, think about it. Think of the imagery. You're a whore. Even if you do come home occasionally, you're still whoring yourself out there. So your occasional love that you give is still an abomination because you're violating my covenant. We have to understand it's a contrast between those first two. It's not saying, I no longer care about your sacrifices, just love me. He's saying, the sacrifices only make sense if you love me. The burnt offerings only make sense if you're paying attention to the knowledge of God, if you're putting these things into practice. Apart from them, it's empty ritual, and it's further enraging God. And so we see this if you jump a couple chapters down to Hosea 8. He says this in 8:11. Ephraim has multiplied altars for sinning. They have become to him altars for sinning. So they have altars, but they're using them for sinning. The altars are not bringing pleasure to God. It's not bringing forgiveness. And you just have to read through the book. They sow to the wind, they shall reap the whirlwind. Okay? They've made kings, but not for me. They set up princes, but I knew it not. I mean, you just have to just read the book. And then when you get to the point, you'll understand Hosea is not just kind of throwing in there haphazardly this new theology of, oh, well, God is no longer about the sacrifice. He's saying, you guys are getting everything wrong. Your sacrifices don't please me. You don't even understand the love of God. You've rejected the knowledge of God. Your sacrifices aren't doing what you think they're doing because you are in such violation that I'm calling you out as a whore. So again, this other chapter, it's easy to just come into Hosea 6:6 and pluck that verse out of the context, but the whole book is God lambasting Israel and Judah for their treatment of the covenant, for the way that their treatment of God, for their rebellion and their whoredom. And God is upset with them. And that's the context you have to read these verses in. And again, there's a context in David when that's said. There's a context in Hosea when it's said. And the context in what we need to understand, the point of Isaiah 53 is the sacrifice is necessary until God himself, Jesus, comes and takes it away. He's the one who takes it away. It is atonement on the cross. It's not just an act that God does. It's an atonement. It's a forgiveness. It's necessary. And that's why God ultimately takes it on himself, because even we mess up the sacrifice. Even we can sin so bad that there isn't a sacrifice. And that's why we need God to ultimately come and handle it himself. He is the one who makes atonement. He is the one who makes propitiation. He is the one who makes that payment to God and satisfies him. And then therefore we're welcome and we're forgiven, and that's the gospel, and it's amazing. And so David can cry out, rightfully so, looking forward to the character of God, because ultimately one day he will provide that sacrifice of atonement All we have to do is come to God and confess our sin and ask for forgiveness, and He is faithful and just to forgive us because He makes atonement, because He offers Himself as that sacrifice. The Word of God is not slowly undermining this idea, therefore changing the nature of what Jesus came to do on the cross. It's like, that's not in there. That's not what these two verses are about. Contextually, they're speaking about something else, and we need to make sure that we spot that. So if you hear a pastor or a teacher saying the atonement is a bad doctrine, is an evil doctrine, is not what's going on, you know you're listening to someone who has an agenda going on, and they're not rightly exegeting the Word of God. So pay attention and know that God very much did something that was necessary in order for you and I to be welcome into the kingdom of God. So thank you guys so much. Bye.